Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer and welcome to the breaking news. Today's breaking news is that Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that war is coming to Europe, and while it is going to be a short while away, they are going to be preparing in the meantime. According to the direct statement from Prime Minister Donald Tusk, he said, "I do not want to scare anyone, but war is no longer a concept from the past." That was a direct quote from the Prime Minister today, made by Politico Europe and published on Twitter for everyone to see. At the exact same time, the Polish government suspended the Treaty of Conventional Armed Forces, which requires that the Polish government list the locations of their armed forces and their current movements, and they have now stepped back from this treaty, meaning that Polish armed forces are free to move throughout the territory of Poland without having to notify the Polish government for them to notify the Russians or any other European nations on where their armed forces are and what they are currently doing. These two actions made by the Polish government, both through the statement from the Prime Minister as well as the Polish government's revocation of this Treaty of Conventional Armed Forces, is showing that the Polish government is on a war path and is currently working towards creating a situation that will be advantageous for the Polish armed forces. The revoking of the Treaty of Conventional Armed Forces is most likely revolved around more so sensitive or secure military sites such as an anti-air defense battery, and allowing them to be moved throughout the territory of Poland without any armed forces having a good idea where those modern air defense systems are. This means that the Russians, if wanting to conduct a preemptive attack on Poland, would not be able to strike such vital defense structures as the air defense because they would not know their current locations. Modern air defense, especially inside of the Republic of Poland, does not revolve around any sort of a static position, much like older air defense would have. Most modern air defense, if not all air defense operated by the Republic of Poland, is a mobile air battery, meaning that these batteries are all wheeled, much like a Patriot air defense battery or some kind of a Buk or a Tunguska, and they are able to go wherever they need to go inside of Poland and are able to move after they fire, making sure that the enemy forces, such as the Russian Federation and Belarus, in a hypothetical war scenario, would not be able to easily target and destroy these air defense sites, leaving Poland without any kind of real defense from any incoming air attacks. Also, on top of that, they are most likely revoking the treaty so that way they can move Polish armed forces into the area of the Suwalki Gap without Belarusian and Russian forces easily having access to that information, and it's going to require that the Russians employ some of their military satellites, surveillance satellites, and the Belarusians to employ some kind of recon forces or some kind of recon ability to be able to try and figure out where these Polish armed forces may be. This, however, are clear indications and massive steps forward in showing that the Polish Republic is ready for war and that they will be moving towards that kind of a state in the future. And if there was a war to unfold, Poland is already working on making that a certainty that Poland would not be in the backwater or more so in a bad situation at the very onset of that conflict. At the exact same time, we are seeing that the Russians are very lackadaisical about their drone attacks and also their missile operations inside the territory of Ukraine, as just last night, Polish F-16s had to be mobilized and scrambled again so that way they could reach the Polish-Ukrainian border and prepare for any Russian missiles that may fly over. If they were to fly over, the plan by the Polish air defense was to shoot them down once they started to enter Polish airspace. We are also seeing that inside of Romania, apparently drone wreckage has been found not too far away from one of the larger cities of Bralia inside of Romania, and we were able to see here in this video published by Nexta that there was a large crater caused by a Shahed 136 drone and a large amount of debris strewn throughout the fields, showing once again that another Shahed 36, the fifth one of the war, had ended up landing deep inside of Romanian territory and exploding. These kinds of attacks right here, or more so the failure of an attack on Ukrainian soil and the accidental explosion of a drone on Romanian territory, is once again showing that the Russians have absolutely no regard for NATO sovereignty, the security of NATO airspace, or the safety of NATO citizens on the ground. It may be instances like these that are propelling the Baltic states and Poland to start acting a lot more provocatively or a lot more precautionary steps against the Russian Federation and Belarus because they're seeing what is happening currently inside of Romania. This is the fifth time that a drone has flown over the Danube River and ended up striking Romania. I know that I said this fact earlier, but this is a very important one to note. Not too long after the first attack started to occur, after drones were exploding just on the other side of the Danube near the port of Renai, we saw that NATO created an air defense perimeter that existed within the Danube Delta, right down here where the mouse cursor is circling, and heading all the way up into the area of Bralia. This appears to have not been a massive air defense perimeter or one that is no longer active, because now we are seeing that a drone was once again able to pass over the Danube River, was not shot down, and exploded pretty much deep inside of Romanian territory, several miles south of the Danube River. Probably one of the deepest strikes that we've seen on Romanian territory in the war so far. But moving on from that, we're also getting some more news that shows that the Russian Air Force is truly as incompetent as one would believe, as we were able to get information from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense that the Su-27, now confirmed not an Su-35, but an Su-27, was shot down over Sevastopol by friendly forces inside of the port, according to information that was found. This was published by the Kyiv Independent, and they said that the Ukrainian Navy was able to confirm that the Russian Federation shot down its own Su-27 aircraft over the area of Crimea. This is something that is fairly interesting to note, because it's showing that the Ukrainians may not have the ability to strike that deep behind Russian airspace. This is something that seems a little bit clear on the surface, as this is nearly 170 miles away from the nearest front lines of Ukraine and 170 miles away from the nearest surface-to-air missile that could be launched. But this once again brings up the fact that the A-50 command aircraft that was shot down near the town of Novocherbinovskaya, right here, most likely it was shot down by Russian-friendly air defense more so than was shot down by Ukrainian S-200. The distance in between these two hypothetical attacks was only 20 miles, meaning that if an S-200 was to be fired, it could have hypothetically reached Sevastopol if the Ukrainians were going to target Russian air targets over the city of Sevastopol. But once again, we are seeing that now the Ukrainian Navy is confirming that it was Russian air defense that shot down their own Su-27. And if they are able to shoot down a Su-27 flying directly over the port, as we saw in footage just from the other day, then there is no doubt that they could have also shot down the A-50 that was flying directly over the air defense batteries over in the area of the town of Novocherbinovskaya just a couple of weeks ago when that happened, and the Russians lost another $500 million command plane. This is once again showing to me that apparently there is a massive fault in the communications networks in between the Russian ground forces and the Russian air forces, as it seems that both sides are not communicating all too well where the Air Force's aircraft currently are, and making sure that the air defense in the area understands what is going on above their heads. This is one of the many instances where we've seen that a friendly fire has claimed the loss of another Russian aircraft, and we're seeing that this is once again a fairly normal occurrence. Given this fact, we can understand that Russian air defense batteries on the Ukrainian front lines are also probably not working at full efficiency. Due to the complete lack of communication that they have with the air forces of the Russian Federation, they may be mistaking Ukrainian aircraft for Russian ones and Russian ones for Ukrainian ones, and that may be increasing further air casualties for the Russian Air Force going on here into the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, inside of Moscow, we were able to hear today that ISIS is claiming that the Russian Federation is weak, because instead of actually claiming that ISIS was the one to have conducted the attack, they're trying to focus the blame on the West. This is the direct statement from an ISIS spokesperson, or more so a statement made to Al-Naba, which is a ISIS-affiliated newspaper. By blaming Western countries for the terrorist attack, Russia recognized its failure in the face of the Islamic State. After its resounding defeat, Russia found no choice but to direct accusations of collusion against its opponents in the Western camp to evade admitting its major failure in the face of the Mujahideen, said a new issue of Al-Naba, a newspaper distributed on behalf of ISIS. This is something that is fairly interesting, because we're seeing that ISIS is now actually starting to push the Russians to give them credibility for the attack. They do not want Ukraine to be the one that is credible for this attack, or to blame, and they are not to blame at all from what we understand based off of information and facts that we were able to find, and official Ukrainian and CIA statements, as well as official US government statements from the Department of State. The Ukrainians in the Western world is not reliable, or liable more so, for this attack that occurred at Crocus City Hall, yet the Russians are continuing to try and push this theory that the West really was behind the attack and that they actually were responsible. ISIS has conducted terrorist attacks on Western countries in the past. For example, the San Bernardino attack of 2015 is probably one of the most notable ones that I can bring up for my American audience. Probably one of the more notable ones inside of Europe was the Nice truck attack, which occurred at a concert, or more so the London Bridge stabbing attack that occurred inside of London for our European viewers, as well as many other different kinds of attacks that happened in Germany, but those are so numerous that we're not even going to start listing off any of them. Beyond that, however, ISIS is not affiliated with the West, and they do not want to be affiliated with the West quite clearly, as they're putting out in that newspaper. They are a terrorist group that is acting against anyone that is not a part of the Islamic State, and we can see here that they're trying to make that very clear, and they're even saying that the Russians are cowards and weak because they're not going to admit that fact and give ISIS the blame that they feel they deserve. Pretty odd to see that a group would be begging to get the blame put on them, but ISIS is a weird group as far as we know. But moving on from the city of Moscow and up into the area of St. Petersburg, we are also able to hear that apparently the deportation of migrants is currently underway inside of the city. We're not exactly sure if this is directly related to the Crocus Hall attack, and now they're taking the blame out on the migrants, although they're clearly trying to take the blame out on the West. But they are apparently attempting to deport a large amount of migrants that are inside the city of St. Petersburg. If we were to take the normal Russian playbook off of this, they're most likely going to be threatening these people with deportation unless they join the Russian armed forces, so that way they can continue to try and bolster the manpower of the Russian army inside of Ukraine. And also, interestingly enough, this may be working on building up a force for the two new armies that the Russians are building out of the brand new Leningrad military district that was created just weeks ago. Notice that the deportations are only happening in St. Petersburg, and St. Petersburg is the very core of the Leningrad military district, and the headquarters of this military district is inside the city of St. Petersburg. This is most likely, once again, some sort of an attempt to threaten these people with deportation and then force them into the Russian army, so that way they can bolster the numbers of the Russian armed forces and continue to try and keep the war in Ukraine at least feasible for the moment, or to try and build up a combat reserve to deal with NATO with in the future, considering that it does appear that on both sides, everyone is fairly clear that a war may be on the horizon. But with that, that is all of the major breaking news that we have today. I thank every single one of you all so much once again for watching, and a huge shout out to our patrons on Patreon who help to make these videos possible. If you do enjoy this video, please make sure to consider supporting us on Patreon. The link is in the description below this video, as it helps us to make video projects like these possible. Not only that, if you did enjoy, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment, because we put out these videos pretty much every single day, and they are as often as we can. I can't say that it's going to be every single day of the week. We do them as much as we can whenever there's enough news to cover at this time of day, and today was one of those days. But still, thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.